Welcome to the Wisdom to Wealth podcast. This is the podcast where we interview the wealthiest entrepreneurs and business owners in the world. This podcast has been blessing so many people, so I just want to thank you all for tuning in. I am your host, Shamar Star Cox, TV producer and marketing coach. I help 6 and 7 figure business owners create binge-worthy content in a way that attracts their followers and then converts their followers into customers. I am also the founder of the Convert Content to Cash Challenge. So if you want to learn how to create content that sells in 5 days or less, feel free to comment challenge accepted on Instagram or DM me challenge accepted, and I will personally send you an invite. You all are going to be blown away. I have George Bryant here with us today. He is a visionary entrepreneur and marketing expert, passionate about creating transformative customer journeys. His storytelling has helped him build an online following on social media, on social media and on his website as well. He also has an amazing podcast. I just finished listening to his conversion story today as he gave his life back to God. And I was just blown away by the vulnerability that you shared in your podcast. So I can see why your followers, your community, your friends have all connected with you. So I'm really excited that we get to have this conversation today. George also has a book. He became New York Times bestseller for 22 weeks, and his app was named 2015's #1 health app by Apple, with a core belief that relationships beat algorithms. And let me tell you, I've been saying that all week ever since I saw that line. George has crafted thousands of customer journeys that emphasize authentic connections over impersonal tactics. George, welcome to the show and thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's an honor. I told you the moment I met you, I was like, can we please be friends? Like, I'm
Yes.
just like honored. I'm honored. I'm so excited to be here and support and serve and give anything I can to help anybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go into your story. Let's take it from where you started to where you are now, and how did your journey go?
Yeah. And just for the sake of time, since none of us are signing up for a 5-part chosen series to watch my life story, truthfully, there's probably more chapters in mine than there are in the Bible. 66, mine might be 70. And so the short version is I had a pretty rough childhood. So I grew up in Massachusetts and, blessed my parents, but they had their own demons and struggles. And so I've basically been on my own since I was 13. There was a lot of drug abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. And at a very early age, I don't know why, I can just say it was the voice of God. Like there was a part of me that was like, I'm not going to be in this situation. I'm not going to end up like this. And so I struggled with eating disorders. I was bulimic. And when I was 17, I decided to join the Marine Corps to get away. And so I was like, running away seemed like the best option. So I went from trauma to trauma, except they celebrated mine. And so I spent 13 years of my life on active duty as a United States Marine, couple combat deployments, and then throughout my career, got injured quite a few times. Almost lost my legs in 2004, and then like 7 traumatic brain injuries, like 2010, 2011. And so right around there, they were like, hey, we're basically done with you. But I was blessed because in Afghanistan, I had a big shift in my life when my father passed away to, I pray every day, went back to the Lord. And I was like, I can't live like this. Like, I'm just pretending to live. And I was just committing slow suicide. And so I was like, I want to be healthy. I want to be happy. And so I kind of changed my whole life after that catalytic moment. And I was like, I don't want to be bulimic anymore. And I want to feel healthy and proud of myself. And so I was like, I'm going to teach myself how to cook, but I needed accountability. And so without telling anybody, I had to make a fake college email address in 2010 to get a Facebook account because I never went to college. And I was like, I'm going to post it on the internet. And so I would make a recipe every day and I would post it. And when I posted it, it was my accountability to eat clean and to take care of my body. And by the blessings of God, interestingly enough, is after about 6 months of doing that consistently, someone's like, you should launch a blog. I'm like, what's a blog? Right. And like, you want to talk about bad business advice. Number one, my first website's name was civilized caveman cooking creations.blogspot.com. So like really, really doing it right out of the gate. And I became a food blogger by accident. The Marine Corps medically separated me. And so I kind of fell into entrepreneurship accidentally. And I leaned all the way in. And in 2 short years, that blog was getting a couple million people a month on it. I had, maybe like 15,000 or so social media followers, email list. And then someone's like, you should write a book. And I didn't know how to do that. And I was like, well, I'll figure that out. I found a publisher and they're like, we won't publish your book. You're not big enough. I'm like, don't tell me that. And I was like, you're going to publish it anyways. And then I kind of broke every rule in the book. And They're like, you'll never be a New York Times bestseller. You'll never do whatever. But I just focused on service and I focused on caring, and I had some crazy ideas. And 2 years after never knowing how to cook, I became a New York Times bestselling cookbook author. And that lasted for probably 4 or 5 years. I launched the app a couple years later. My first ever digital product in that company made $1 million because I spent 2 years serving people and basically asked them what they wanted. Then I gave it to them and they kind of blessed me in return. But really, that first career in entrepreneurship was kind of a place to hide from my demons. I'd never addressed my childhood. I'd never addressed the war, the suicides, my addictions, and all of it. And so I basically built that company massive, but it was a hiding place for me. And so after a very profound experience in the jungle of Costa Rica, which brought me back home and started my relationship with God again, I made the hardest decision of my life, and I went against what everybody said. And I was like, I need to walk away from this company. And my business partners, my coaches, my ex-wife at the time was like, no, this is the stupidest thing you could ever do. But my heart was like screaming, like, you have to follow your heart. And in 24 hours, like 3 weeks away from bankruptcy, I was like, I called a friend and I was like, I need you to take over the company in the next 24 hours. I want nothing to do with it. And I deleted all those social media followers, which is like one of the most liberating feelings in the world, by the way, like, 500,000 people that everybody tries to collect. And I was like, no, let's delete them. Let's get rid of them. Change my phone number, change my email. And I fell off the face of the earth for 3 years and I dove into myself. And God blessed me so much because like 2 weeks later, I had a friend call. I was like, hey, I miss you. I have some friends coming over, come hang out at the house. It happened to be like a mini mastermind. And so many people I love and respect were there, like Jim Quick and Aubrey Marcus and Tucker Max and all these people. And in that room, I just went as myself authentically. I was a mess. I was in tears. And then I started helping a few of them. And by the grace of God, there were 22 people in the room. I didn't even know consulting was a thing. And 20 of them hired me that day. And that's how I became a consultant. And so then I spent the next 3 to 4 years teaching people how I had built that company through relationships, because I was just doing it. I didn't know. I was just like, oh, I taught myself this. I'll figure it out. And then all the companies that I'd worked with as an affiliate were like, how'd you do this? Come help us. And so that's how I got involved. And I helped scale 2 companies to $1 billion and probably over 100 companies into the 7, 8, and 9-figure mark. And then after a while of being off the internet, I realized I kind of missed people, but I missed service. And I was like, I need to come back. But I made a rule with my team, like, don't ever tell me how many followers we have. Don't ever tell me how many likes we get. Our mission is to help one person a day. And if that's it, I don't care. And that's why we come back and exist. And so then that's where I came back on social. And then I launched the podcast. And now, truthfully, I have a belief in my body that I belong washing everybody's feet every day. And I want to help people who have an impact. And so now I have the podcast. I do live events where we charge costs for tickets for 3 days to have entrepreneurs come, and we speak into them around marketing and mindset and customer journey. And it's my number one favorite thing to do, just like you, is like, I help people with a vision and an impact who love themselves and love their customers design customer journeys and marketing that feel in alignment and don't sell their soul. And then they get to scale their company the right way. And that's what I spend all my time doing now. And that is the shortest version I can give you.
I'm just telling you, in that short version, you just packed so much into it. I'm like, we can go here, we can go here, we can go here. I already know what my next question is, but I want to put out some points that you brought up. You have this energy about you that represents the epitome of 2 Corinthians 9, verse 6. Those who sow sparingly shall reap sparingly, and those who sow generously shall reap generously. And here you are getting to reap so generously because you have a heart of service. You are constantly sowing into people. Even your tagline, relationships beat algorithms. You know, there are a lot of people trying to beat algorithms by posting content, and you're like, beat it by building relationships, and not building relationships that are transactional, transformational, where you can create a win-win. You can have conversations. Like off the bat, when we met, you were like, Star, we got to be friends. And I said, yes, because I was looking for friends in this season. You know, like just having that inclusion is amazing. Another part of your story, I can hear, I know, like in hindsight, probably at the time you weren't noticing this, but as I'm hearing your story, I can hear each time God was giving you the next step. And it was coming because you were taking action steps. And I meet a lot of business owners where they want the full picture before they actually take the step. You were just like, I don't know how to cook, but I want to eat better. So I'm going to learn how to cook. Then someone says, you should start a blog. Like that was one, okay, here's your next step. Because you took the first step of learning how to cook, here's your next step. You should write a book. Because you started writing the blog, here's your next step. And I just love how, well, to me, it sounds like there was no fear, but you can let us know. Was there any fear that you had as you were taking each one of these steps?
Oh, girl, there was so much, and truthfully, the season of me growing up as a like survivalist, like and having to fend for myself, the pattern that got built into me before my relationship with God is that my back had to be against a wall. And so it was always that feast or famine, feast or famine. But I realized that in those moments, the pressure of like losing it all was enough to get me going. And that's something I've eradicated out of my life wholeheartedly to operate in faith. But to your point, it also reminds me of like my favorite verse that I read. I think it was Isaiah 43. And it was like, as I continue to walk through an inhospitable, violent wilderness, constantly walking away from what was and walking towards what will be. And the key word being walking. And, the lesson in my life now is I'm actually rebuilding it all again after navigating a divorce and like restructuring. And it took me a while to like pray through it and come back. And I was like, wait, I can see it, but it's not my job to understand the numbered steps. It's my job to take the steps. And that's the biggest part is like that stagnation and rumination is where the devil works, right? Like doubt and shame are the two biggest things that he uses as a tool. If we can get us to doubt it and not believe in its possibility, it's not that we can't have it, it's that we believe that we can't, and so we stop taking the actions and we stop listening to the voice of God and hitting those heart intuitions and those pieces. And so I've realized now that anytime I face fear, it's not mine to carry, it's mine to give to God and just to ask for clarity for the next step. And I've now like changed my relationship with fear. Like I see the fear that I have as like a respect. It's like a respect of God and doing it with humility and doing it for the right reasons and like tuning up my heart of like, boom, because I know even as the human and the flesh in me is like when things get hard or the divorce gets hard or, there's accusations thrown around. The first place I want to do is run away from the world. But not only did the Bible, but every pastor I tells us that like prayer doesn't happen when you're alone. It happens in community when you're surrounded by people, when you're being authentic and you're honoring yourself. And to even tie it into business, it's like we forget that like our bank account balance isn't on our headstone when we die. Right. And I don't care how many people show up to my funeral. I care about how many people show up to support my family when I'm no longer here. Right. And that only comes from relationships and even tactically. Like I say this about people all the time. Like, when have you ever walked into a store, been excited to buy something, but then felt transacted and unsafe? Did you still pay with your credit card? No. But if you take Maya Angelou, that nobody remembers what you said, but they remember how you make you feel. And your first interaction with somebody is a transaction, or I don't have the time for you, or I don't care about you, or I can't talk to you right now, or you have to pay to get on my calendar, or I won't give you that till you pay me. Are we really, really being of service? Or are we really blocking the greatest gift that we have, which is the human connection and the relationship? And so I see the internet, and the internet's like my enemy, but also my playing ground, where it's like we can bring heart into the internet. We can bring connection into the internet. We can bring all of those things. But it does require a level of humility and a level of service, because the way that I see it is like if it shows up in my space, God put it there. Who am I to question why it's there? And that's the muscle that I face every day. And it's no longer fear of him or fear of what's next. It's acknowledging the fear of myself and my iniquities. And then when I have those, giving them to God and being like, Lord, just give me the strength to discern through this, or give me the spirit of the Holy Spirit, or, what would you do in this situation? Like, how can I show up? And some days, and even over the holiday season, I felt like, girl, I was doing that 652 times a day. Like it was like on my knees in my Bible, like boom, 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 and boom, boom, boom. And even finding the fleshly things of like, oh, but I could have this and I could have this. And yet I'm not looking at what I do have that God's blessed me with. Right. And like, if you're not even believing in God, like gratitude is the number one way to have more of what you want. And so I think it's like changed my relationship with fear in such a big way. But I also feel like we should have fear, because if your vision is clearly in front of you, it's not your vision because it's been done before. It's not supposed to be a pre-lit step. It's supposed to be, I step in the dark and I trust God that there's a foothold where I put my foot. Like that's faith. And I think that that's the biggest part. But even in entrepreneurship, the best ideas aren't something that we copy from somebody else. It's that moment our heart screams like, you got to do this. They talk about in the Bible, the moment you become a Christian, you're going to be persecuted. Everyone's going to doubt you. It's no different in entrepreneurship, right? But like, we all celebrate Elon Musk, we celebrate Zuckerberg, we celebrate these people. And they spent their whole career being told they couldn't do it, they couldn't do it, they couldn't do it, they couldn't do it. And to your point, it's a step-by-step journey. And it's great to have a direction, right? I call them fuzzy goals. I just need to make sure your compass is pointed somewhere forward. I don't even care if it's only moving 1 degree and you're going sideways because you're making progress, but it's those mile markers along the journey. And it's relationships. And through the business, you build relationships with people, which also strengthens your relationship with yourself, right? And like, do I really put my money where my mouth is, right? Like, am I really responding to the DMs that I said I care about? Like, am I really like still having that heart of service? Because as much as I'm good at it and as much as I'm clear and like it's what I do, it's also a struggle sometimes where I'm tired or my son's calling me or I'm like, do I have it in me? And I'm like, of course I have it in me. Let's go to the gym, right? Like I look at it like it's my gym now. And I'm like, you go to the gym to flex a muscle to be stronger. And I was like, service is like the easiest muscle to flex. But I've also realized that it's a win-win game because the worst thing that happens at the end of the day when you serve somebody, what are they going to say? Oh my God, he spent an entire hour helping me and he's the worst man ever. Like, no, it's not about like buying my products or hiring me as a coach, right? It's just really about playing a game for legacy and honoring God in the process. And like for me, the thing that I pray now is like, even before this podcast, like, Holy Spirit, do whatever you want with me and let everybody feel the love of God. Like just using the love of God and that like just divine blanket and soft spot to fall is like how I try to show up every day. And I find that it's the easiest way. And even with that quote of like the fear, I talked to my 8-year-old son about this the other day. It's like, Daddy, I'm feeling sad. And I was like, well, Bubba, the easiest way to get what you want is to give it away. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, if you're feeling sad, let's go make somebody else happy. And he's like, oh, and we did. And we went and made somebody laugh. And then like he was cheerful. And it's like the easiest way to think about it. And so I think is like me as a Christian, but also as an entrepreneur, the only time we lose is when we stop following the path. And it's not our job to know the path. It's our job to follow the path. And in that path, you learn, you grow, you become. And I think even right now, timeliness of this in 2025 is a lot of people are feeling this in business. There's a reinvention and remerging happening with entrepreneurship, like how things were done and how social's done, and TikTok might be banned and webinars aren't working like they used to. And I was like, yeah, the obstacle's the opportunity. So what hasn't been created that's waiting for you to birth? What hasn't been done that's waiting for you to create? But it only comes, to your point, on the other side of action. And so it's only okay. Like for me, I'm like, I don't ask questions anymore. I take the actions and reflect. And if I start walking down a path, I'm like, well, this one doesn't seem like it's working. But at least I know I'm not wondering, I'm not ruminating, I'm not guessing. And so it's about living in these micro bites of like, we can adjust that, we can bring that into integrity, we can do that differently. And that's where we develop that trust and we develop that confidence and that momentum. And I think that that's what faith is.
Oh, that is so good. First of all, I just really like sitting here under your wisdom. I'm like catching everything that you're sharing. I want to take it back a little bit as you were talking about relationships. This is something that I teach my clients. I teach Bible marketing secrets. I like to teach from the life of Jesus, how he was able to grow his following and then convert his followers into believers, right? And here you are talking about relationships. That was the number one thing that Jesus did. And then you talked about serving the people, like without even asking for anything up front. Here was Jesus. If we look at Luke 5, this is where he meets his disciples for the first time. The first thing that he noticed was that the disciples had a need.
Mhm.
So what did he do? He went and served them. He didn't go follow me first. He served them first. And then after they got the results for free, then he said, follow me for I will make you fishers of men. So when I hear you talking about this service and you're like, you don't got to pay for it. You don't got to do this. Like there's no tricks or gimmicks. Like I'm just serving you because this is in my heart. I can
Mhm.
really hear it. And I want everyone who's watching now to be able to receive this wisdom, because it was even hard for me to grasp it when I first started my business. And I'll tell you why it was hard for me to grasp it. I had a poverty mindset. So for me, I'm like, I had the poverty mindset, lack. I was looking through a lens of lack and a lens of scarcity. So for me, there was desperation that was coming out. Like, I need to make this money now, or I won't be able to pay my bills. But when you shift your focus from desperation and focus on divinity, divinity allows you to see eternity, and you recognize what's really going to help you to grow, become a better person, to heal our relationships. So I really love how you talked about that. You touched on this in your first response where you talked about social media really being able to grow your following to a certain level. And then you were like, get rid of it. I don't want any of it anymore. Even when you restarted your business, you were like, don't share any of this with me. Let's talk about some of the dangers of like growing your following pretty largely, and what does that do to you internally and how you were able to overcome it.
Oh, that is one of the best questions I've ever been asked, actually. So like, thank you. I love being on video with you. I will do this with you all. We can do a series, girl. Like we can start our own series. Like I am in. I could do this with you all day. And I'm going to answer that. But to the one thing that you talked about, and God, I love the way that you tie the Bible into it. I have the Maxwell Leadership Bible. What I love is it calls out all of those moments of like what it takes to build a vision and leadership and enrollment in the people. There's a really incredible book that a friend of mine wrote. He was on my podcast, Bob Berg. It's called The Go-Giver. And it's incredible short story and parable about the act of giving and like how it works and where we are. Because I even teach this strategically and tactically without the Bible. But I'm like, to everybody, just to nail it home, because I love your question so much, but like God puts it in my heart and I like have to say it. I'm like, if you walk into a store and you're one of 50 people, right? And like you go to this event, right? Or let's say marketing event, because we've all experienced them, right? There's people who sell at the back table in the back of the room, right? And you go and there, you see three of them and like, oh my God, I'd love to help you, pay me $5,000. I'd love to help you, pay me $2,000. I'd love to help you, pay me $5,000. And then you meet someone who's like, no, how can I help you right now? Like, oh, you got 20 minutes? Like, let me just help you right now. Who's the one that you remember? Like, what's the one that leaves an indelible mark on your heart? Like, even in psychology, it's called endowment and a social trigger, right? But it's really just being a human being, because I say this to people all the time. Everybody wants revenue. Well, before revenue, you need a relationship. And once you have a relationship, you can get somebody a result. Once they have a result, then you can get revenue, because it's like blindly committing. And I'm like, you're also making it so much easier on yourself strategically, because even if you call me, you're like, George, I'm having a customer journey issue. Money is not in my mind. I'm like, I got an hour. What do you got? And you're like, here, I'm going to serve your face off for an hour and I'm going to help you. But then here's the tactical part. If you jump off that call and we don't talk for 6 months and you're talking to other people like, God, I'll rebuild that for you. Yeah, first you got to pay me. The only person you're going to remember is me and the fact that I gave it to you for free. And then when you reach out, I'm like, oh, can I help you again? Sure. Like, oh, and I'll be like, hey, we're at that point, but I really think I could. Do you want to? Right. So, like, even in that lens, when you like break it down and bake it down, it's really the only way to be successful. And this is why I love pre internet, because pre internet's how business was done. Right. You didn't have the shortcut. And I think everybody thinks the internet is this different world. It's the same world we live in with a sped up process that either increases the amount of pain that you cause or pleasure that you create. And so I just wanted to nail that home. And to answer your question, the easiest way to summarize what happened, I think I had about 1 million followers combined. And the biggest challenge that I had is I lost my entire identity to that platform, all of them. I didn't know who I was anymore. Everything felt like a performance, right? And the pressure alone, like it was like I had to be on my phone, I had to post, I had to keep feeding the hungry, I had to perform, and not even in a hard lens. I was in food blogging. But the downstream is like circus, like you had to entertain, you had to entertain. And the amount of cognitive dissonance I had, because like I didn't know who I was or what version I was, because like no part of me wanted to be on it. I wanted to be with my son, but I wasn't. So I was consumed, like consumed by this phone. Everything was recorded. Every meal was photographed. Everything was videoed. Everything was talked about. Like, and like to the point where it was actually when I went to Disneyland, Disney World in Florida with my kids, it like broke me, because I was like, oh, we're going to Disney. I got stopped like 42 times in a day. I'm a dude food blogger. And they're like, George. And I was like, whoa, this is not like kind of what I want. And it was because I was inauthentic. I was chasing the like, I was chasing the number. I was like, what do I have to do, or who do I have to become for more and more people to see this, to feed the machine, because just like gambling, the dopamine goes away and it's like, oh, now 100,000 is not an X. Now 150, now 250. It's never enough. And so then the bigger and bigger it gets, the longer the gap between, and you're not getting a payoff. And so it broke my brain, like at a deep, deep level. And the only way that I could remove it is I had to eradicate it completely. And I'm going to be really honest, when I deleted it and went away, I was depressed for probably 18 months. I didn't know who I was, like without picking up a phone and documenting and be like, hey guys, George here, live again, blank, blank. Like it owned me. It was my idol. It was every single thing of my identity. And so removing it was the only way for me. But like now in retrospection, like in looking at it now, it's a tool that I have. And it's a tool that I have to impact and influence people, but it will never come at the lens of self-sacrifice. It will never come at the detriment of self. And so, like, if I feel it, girl, I'm on fire. I'm doing stories, I'm editing them, I'm out. And then, like, during December, our reach went down 55,000 people. And everyone's like, are you upset? I'm like, no, I was with my son. I was sledding. I was playing outside. I was building snowmen. I was like, let's go. Right. And so one of the things I say to people all the time is like, we convince ourselves we do this business and entrepreneurship because we want more time, money, and freedom. But yet we all have access to that time, money, and freedom now. And we're sacrificing our life to build a business instead of building a business that supports our life. And that's the biggest part, because we don't know when the time's up. Like, we don't know when our days are numbered. God bless us that we all get to live this fruitful life. But you watch people at the end of their life, you watch people getting interviewed at the end of their life, and the one thing that they wish they had was more present moments in time in the real world. And so I think leadership is also an embodied example. And to your point about Jesus, he embodied everything. He was a perfect man, right? But that means that even how you show up is teaching people how to show up with you. It's teaching people how to show up in their life. And our example has way more power than the words that we speak. And so I've found, like, just radical honesty and authenticity is the number one way. And is it the fast way? Hasn't been for me. I've had one video go viral my whole career. I've been doing this for 15 years. One video. I am like God has like made me the king of slow consistency. And I was like, all right, I got you, Lord. Like, it's probably better for my ego anyways. Keep me humble, right? But the rest of it has just come from being authentic. So like, if I'm sad, I don't get on Instagram and be like, hey guys, like, just, peeing rainbows and unicorns over here. I'm like, God, I'm like, man, I had a rough morning, but here's what I learned. And here's what I'm choosing to do anyways. Or, hey, I've been off for the last week because I was on a 7-day fast with the Lord. And I felt like it was sacred time for me. And like, it's my home. Like, Instagram is my house, not theirs. Facebook is my house, not theirs. And I would never let somebody walk into my kitchen and tell me how to rearrange it or tell me how to cook for my kid. You're sure as crap not going to get to dictate how I show up online. And so it took years to find these distinctions, but truthfully navigating them is like checking in with your heart. And that sometimes means there's things that we get to do because they're attached to the vision. If I had it my way, I'd be back in business with no social, no website, no anything. But for me, they're now the steps in the process to have the influence and impact that I want. But I still get to drive that relationship. I still get to drive what that looks like. But I'm also going in eyes wide open. Could I have 1 million followers? Probably. Do I want to become the man that puts that energy in and plays those games? No. So therefore, it's nothing but gratitude for what I do have and then celebrating and leaning into it. And so I had to relearn who I was because the world had dictated who I was. And it was bad. I mean, I was labeled narcissistic and, tendencies here and this, but it was true. It was because like I was on or off, and it was like, oh, am I Instagram person today? Am I Facebook person today? Am I like entertainer today? Am I like food blogger today? And then it like led to even bleeding over into my life to where like I couldn't even have a conversation because I like felt like I owed it to everybody to coach them or to help them or to push my beliefs on them. And that was never my heart. I would bawl when somebody gave me that feedback. I would cry for days. And I was like, that's not my heart. But I became this false version. And it was so deep and so endowed. it cost me relationships, it cost me friendships, it cost me my marriage. And I'm blessed that I walked that path because now I know. And it's so anchored into like who I am now that I'm like, oh, it's just a tool I get to use. It's like me going to get a cup of coffee. It's the coffee shop I'm choosing to visit today, but it's not where I live. It's not my identity. It's not who I am as a father. It's not who I am as a partner. It's not who who I am as a friend to you. It's not who I am as a business owner. It's just a platform where I get the ability to serve people and they get to serve me, but also it's mine and I get to dictate the rules of the house. And so that's the best way I could answer that.
The best way. That was the greatest way to answer that. Like it was so powerful. And I got really emotional when you were sharing. I wasn't only thinking about social media when you were sharing this, but I thought about money too, because we could like whatever tool, any one of it can control us if we don't know our identity and we don't have a firm foundation, right? Like this tool had transformed your identity. This is how you saw yourself. This is how other people saw you. And like you said, getting that gratification can reaffirm I'm on the right track. I'm doing the right thing, right? But inside, you were dying on the inside.
Dying,
The
dying.
relationships were suffering, and you were created to be someone who can form relationships and who can really help people in this area. And so to hear how social media was distracting you in this, but this part that I love so much, but God, because you were able to let go of it. If you never let go of it, it would have kept on controlling you, but you were able to let go of it. And this is what we do with any addiction.
Any of
Like,
them.
you have to be able to let it go, surrender it to God. And then guess what he does? He cleans us up, heals us, put the right people in our lives to hold us accountable. And then he gives it right back. And he says,
Yeah.
this time you dominate. Because what did he say to Adam and Eve? He said, I want you to subdue this earth. And if social media subdues you, that's the opposite of what God said.
Mm-hmm.
George, I want you to subdue. And this is why
Mm-hmm.
I got emotional because for me, when I started on social media, I remember being so frustrated because I was going viral at first, and then everything stopped. And then I felt like I didn't know what anybody wanted. And then I had started my business. It was like a lot going on. I felt like I was being blocked. Honestly, I felt like it was a spiritual battle I was going through where the enemy was blocking me. Sometimes Instagram wouldn't even upload my posts. And
Yeah.
I remember one time telling God, like, I give up. I'm not going to keep, I didn't ask to do this. First of all, I like being a TV producer. You're the one who told me to quit my job and go to social media. So if you're not going to help me, I'm just going to give up. But he sent two friends to pray for me. And those friends prayed that the God would release the followers, right? And show some growth. Now that was interesting to me because I was like, we're praying for followers now. I didn't know that was a thing. But what God was showing me was that social media was my territory. He was like, you don't give up your territory because if you give it up, someone else is going to take over. And he wasn't talking about people. He was
Yeah.
talking about spirits. They will take over. And so when I hear you talking about this is my house, you're not going to come in my house and tell me how I'm going to cook, how I'm going to raise my child. That's because this is your territory.
Yeah.
And God has given you thousands of souls to be able to bless on this territory. So whatever you say goes. And it's good that you know that now, because now when you share your story, there are so many people who get to be set free before that even happens to them. And then
Yeah.
you talked about the cost, and this cost doesn't only come when you grow. God has given me some promises, and I tend to ask him, like, what is the cost? Like that's something that he said. I can't remember which scripture it is, but he said, "Who builds a house and doesn't ask the cost?" Right? Like
I
when
wrote that down yesterday. That's in Deuteronomy. I think it's 29:10.
what? How did you know I was going to say that scripture today? But that's
Holy moly.
right. But that's
Girl.
God. But you talked about this cost. What's it going to cost for me to build this platform if I'm not submitted? So I just really love that you shared that. So powerful. Did you want to add anything else before I ask you the final question?
I do. Oh, by the way, nope, sorry. It was Luke 14:28. But don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there's enough money to finish it? That's
That's right.
so timely. I love your perspective, like at such a deep level. And even with what you were sharing, the big lesson for me, it doesn't matter what I pray for. What God wants is surrender. What God wants is full trust and full faith. And even now it comes up like there's no finish line with any of this. It's really just honoring it. And even right now I'm in a season of rebuilding the business and what it looks like, and with my CEO, who's also an incredible woman of faith. But I was like, no, it's not my vision, girl, and it's not yours, it's God's. But it's both of our underneath him listening and deciding, like, how do we serve and at what level do we serve? And like, even navigating probably one of the most challenging times in my life, with a divorce and co-parenting and what that's all going to look like. That's why I just finished that 7-day fast. But here's the thing that happened in that fast, and the biggest thing that happened. I took all the distractions off the table, and every time I was in doubt, every time I was in fear, I was like, I made a commitment to do this. It's non-negotiable. Now, who do I get to become to finish it? And that's the biggest breakthrough, because I look back at my life and I look back at all those chapters that God put in front of me, and like, he's been priming me my entire life. And, I joke with myself all the time, but my favorite quote for myself is, when you forget, when you pray to God to move mountains, you wake up with a shovel. Right. And we've all heard the quote, like, he doesn't qualify the call. I mean, he doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And I'm like, oh, every single one of these moments is a moment to become the person. I wasn't a good steward with money for a long time. I had millions and millions of dollars, and I didn't do good with it. I bought cars and I bought houses. And like, the last 2 years, I was like, wait, I don't want any of that. I don't need any of that. Like, I got my clothes, I got my son, I got my friends. And I was like, who can I give this to? Who can I help? Like, how can I help? And like, God's to the same thing, just blessing me with friends and people, like, to spread his kingdom. And I think that that's the best part about business, is like, we're using this incredible tool to spread the love in the kingdom of God. And it's not that you should or shouldn't run business. No, if he put it on your plate, it's yours to run, but it's yours to run in honor of him, and to surrender to the process and become who he's calling you to be called. Like, I mean, we forget Peter. I mean, Peter denied Jesus 3 times after he was crucified, right? Like, and then he had to crucify himself upside down because he didn't feel worthy, right? Like, and I watch those things and it brings to life our humanity, because I forget that, like, I'll never be God. I will never be perfect. I will never be Jesus. He loves me for my iniquities, but he doesn't want me to suffer under them. He wants me to surrender them to him, and then just pick up the phone when he calls. And I think that that's the biggest gift of entrepreneurship in every single bucket, right? Like, because that fear comes in, the doubt. And listen, if it comes with shame and guilt, that's not God. If it comes with clarity in your heart, pick up the phone. But it doesn't mean it's going to be absent of fear. Like, can you imagine living in the desert for 40 years, going back to your homeland, when we said we're just taking 600,000 people through Exodus on a trip, and they live in the wilderness for 40 years, right? Like, it's not our time, it's his time. The eternal timeline is huge, but he's got it numbered. And I think that the biggest part is, like, even in the Bible and even in life, like, being of faith means being in action, means being in action in honor of God. And I think in entrepreneurship, like, to your point, we can get so frustrated in the mundane and so caught up in the this or that. Did they like it? This isn't working. And we're measuring in minutes and hours, and God's measuring in eternity.
So good. Oh, you were like hitting on certain things that I discussed in Bible study on Saturday, as well as what I discussed with myself today. I'm so serious. Like, one thing that I wanted to focus on was not like the earthly riches or the temporary things, but things of eternity. And you just said that. We taught when I was in Bible study. Some of you know that I have a ministry. It's called Whisper Hearing God. And right now we're in this series called The Healthy Christian. And the first installment is called Trust. And the entire thing was about surrendering to God. And you talked about that surrender. So that's so important. I just want to say thank you for sharing that. So let me ask you this. For those who are listening now, and they want to be able to learn more on how they can work with you, how they can build these true relationships, how can they work with you?
Yeah, I love it. The easiest place, and I'm sure you can tell by this, I love people, is number one, my Instagram. Like, if you have a question, if I can serve you, if I can pray for you, if I can give you a word of encouragement, slide into my DMs. You have my permission. I will get back to you. I promise. You will see my bald head and beautiful beard on video, most likely. But I love building relationships, and my Instagram is like where I hang out. And my website, by the way, pink is my color. It is the pinkest website that you will ever see. And it's beautiful. And I love it. And I own it as a man. It's a royalty color. It's pink. But on my website, mineandgeorge.com, we genuinely give away everything for free. I genuinely do everything I can. Our podcast has over 600 episodes now. I teach customer journey, mindset, marketing, relationships. You're coming on the podcast 1000%. And we have some like customer journey resources, and you shared one of them, and our events and anything. And so, what's important for me, and I'm going to say this loudly, even if anything in this conversation touched you and you're like, don't doubt the conversation and don't doubt the download, just reach out, because the worst that happens is I fill your bucket and we both win because we have a new relationship, right? But if you're tickled, if you're like, God, I want to know about that, or I want to learn customer journey, I have more resources galore to send you that will teach you customer journey. And for everything that you help people with, it's like rocket fuel on what you help them with customer journey. And so like, just reach out, shoot us a DM. I would love to serve you. I would love to know you. I would love to follow you. I would love to be in relationship with you. And then we'll let the conversation take it from there.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I did drop both of George's links in the chat on Instagram as well as for YouTube, but you'll also get access to it if you're watching the replay. It'll be in all of the descriptions, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, so that you can get access to it. And I'll unhide this so you can see his name on Instagram. Make sure you follow him. He is very powerful. He has helped so many people, and just his wisdom and philosophy on relationships. That's my favorite part. When I tell you I'm so emotional right now, I am so emotional. I feel like I have so many questions, but we are over time. I don't want to keep you long.
And the one thing that I want to add is, it also doesn't matter what level of business you're on. I will help. If you are just starting and you're toe tapping and making $500 a month, we have something to help you. If you're doing 10 grand a month, 100 grand a month, $1 million a month, I have something to help you. Like, we welcome all people into our kingdom, and we serve all of you. And so I just wanted to say that too, because I have people sometimes like, oh, I was afraid to reach out. No, I'm offering. Please reach out and give me the gift of service, because it also lets me be a better man and walk in integrity with the gifts that God gave me. And so I genuinely mean that for everybody.
Amen. George, thank you for being you. Thank you for being authentic. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your story with us today. It has been such a blessing. I want to thank everyone who joined in. There were so many people on Instagram who was loving everything that you were sharing. I wish I could read some of the comments. They were like, this is amazing. I love it. Thanks for sharing your story. We will be back again with another episode on Wednesday, actually. I'm going to be sharing my journey with overcoming the poverty mindset and the poverty spirit to get to where I am right now. So that'll be Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.